So first and foremost, I would like to apologize in advance. I'm currently getting over the flu, so hopefully I'm not coughing too much right now. But I'd like to introduce a huge labor of love that Crystal has been really the major focus of doing, and it has been my absolute pleasure to assist her in putting this together, specifically within the context of Wiki Project Personal Pronouns. And so this is one project of a group of projects that we've been trying to kind of get off the ground for a while now. And Wiki Project Personal Pronouns is going through the LD4 group series right now. But anyway, I'm Claire. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently an assistant professor at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And joining me today is also Crystal, who's at the University of Washington. Next slide. So very quickly, for those of you who are not familiar with Wikidata, I'm going to be giving a brief rundown before I pass it over to Crystal to talk more about Wiki Project Personal Pronouns in depth. Next slide. So Wikidata is a free, collaborative, multilingual secondary knowledge base. And what that means is it is connected to all of the other wiki projects and contains basic information for those wiki projects so that information can be taken from one wiki project to another more easily. So for example, if you have a person that has a large article in the English Wikipedia and you want to translate it to, say, Russian, or Welsh, you have the basic facts of that figure that you can then more easily utilize as infrastructure to create that new article. Next slide. And so it acts as this central storage repository that can easily be accessed by others. And it consists of mainly of items. And so an item in this case might be a person, a place, a thing. And in addition to those items have statements that are made up of properties that link them to other items. So for example, you might have a person that then has a date of birth, and then the value for that date of birth, as an example. Also, there are these newer things that have been added relatively more recently called lexemes that allow you to have linguistic data connected as well. And so each one of these items is a unique Q number or QID that identifies it in a language agnostic infrastructure. Next slide. So this is an example of what a page looks like for Douglas Adams, who is thankfully Q42. There was increment in numbers, so whoever put this together must have planned it exactly to be as Q42. And so we have a label, a description, and then multiple aliases. So in each, if you were to access this page, say from Turkey, from Japan, etc., you would get the Japanese version or the Turkish version of this page. Everything would be automatically translated as long as those labels are available in that language. And this is really useful because it allows us to interconnect things regardless of whether or not sources are available in a given language. As an example, I was researching a Indonesian trans person, and I unfortunately do not read or understand Indonesian, but because editors have done a great job of translating those resources into Wikidata, it makes it easier to then translate them into other projects. Next slide. And so all of the other Wikimedia family projects, all of them access Wikidata to link to one another. So when you go to a Wikidata page, at the bottom of the page, there will be, for example, every wiki quote, wiki travel, all the different language Wikipedias are all listed. So you can more easily see if something might be missing from one wiki project or might be in every wiki project. It can be very useful, for example, if a person has a particular alias that you know in one language, but not in another. It's not entirely uncommon, for example, that you might know the romanization of a person's name, but then you're trying to find other resources that maybe utilize another spelling. So for example, in like katakana or hiragana. And so you can use Wikidata to kind of see, okay, what are those other spellings look like to find other sources. Next slide. And so this is a really fantastic system because not only is it open and machine readable, but unlike a lot of databases, Wikidata is also human readable, which is really fantastic. It also acts as probably the largest identifier hub across the internet. I don't necessarily know that that's 100% true, but there are literally thousands of different identifiers for databases, many of which are no longer in existence, where the only references to those identifiers are still kept in Wikidata. However, we've also noticed, as was talked about earlier today, that a lot of traffic to Wikidata today is AI driven. And a lot of that is coming from both open artificial intelligence agents and also closed corporate agents. And so when something is put in Wikidata, it often is a slightly lower bar to entry as to Wikipedia. So if I add a new source to Wikipedia, it might, undergo 3 or 4 different rounds of editorial discretion. I might have, as an example, very recently, I put something about pumpkin spice lattes on the latte page, and there was somebody from Italy who was like much more of a latte expert than I am, who was like, this is inappropriate for this. And so it went through maybe 12 rounds of triaging to remove that content. But that's good. That's how Wikipedia is supposed to work. And you have people who are more experts in that content. On Wikidata, because people aren't curating it in the same way, it's very easy to add unsourced references. And most references on Wikidata are unsourced or sourced to Wikipedia projects, which can result in a bit of wonkiness. And then that data gets uptaken by these agents and can cause a number of issues. Next slide. There's a lot of personal demographic data in Wikidata. Um, And it's, like I said, it's a little bit less stringent than in Wikipedia. So for example, we have a lot of academic authors for bibliographic works. Um, and so there's a lot of discussion about, how should these figures be represented if they're more or less public. We have a number of properties that are currently in discussion on Wikidata. Every single one of these has probably thousands of comments that have been discussed openly and in smaller groups. For example, if somebody is convicted of a crime in one jurisdiction, but maybe exonerated in another, or if that person's still alive versus if it was hundreds of years ago, just like in Wikipedia, there's a lot of discussion about what is okay to say and what is okay to represent. What is public? If it's on somebody's Blue Sky account versus in a published encyclopedia, there's some debate as to whether or not that's stringent enough to be included on Wikidata. Next slide. And so I'm going to pass it over to Crystal.
Hello, I'm Crystal Yragui. I also use she, her pronouns, and thank you, Claire, for toughing it out when you're sick. I'm so sorry. I'm going to talk a bit about Wiki Project personal pronouns specifically and the work that we have been doing. Next slide, please. So personal pronouns data in Wikidata is of the personal demographic data in Wikidata, some of the most inconsistent. It's pretty difficult to query because the values are not very consistent. There's not a real, up until very recently, there was not a data model that we were working from. This data is also very poorly referenced. Oftentimes people will be assigned a personal pronoun value based on their first name or based on a picture or based on their gender information, which is also poorly referenced. So it's unreliable data, and oftentimes it is incorrect. The harms that come from this situation include outing people, misgendering folks, and just having incorrect or outdated information about people going out into the web. And even if it's corrected in Wikidata, as Claire mentioned, AI harvests data from Wikidata, and once it's in Wikidata, it's always in the semantic web. Next slide, please. So the goals of our Wiki project were to establish and implement a consistent data model for personal pronoun sets in Wikidata. And this model is capable of reflecting how humans use pronoun sets in real life. We also established and implemented ethical and logical best practices for assigning personal pronoun sets to items representing both human beings and fictional characters. Next slide, please. So the work that we've done is kind of varied. We put out a request for comment, and that was pretty hard. We had, most folks were nice and constructive and worked with us on revising the data model as needed. Some folks were really mean and kind of homophobic in their responses. And so we're really proud that we got that request for comment to a point where it was established as consensus. And we also set up a personal pronouns policy for Wikidata, which reflects our project's work and reflects the consensus reached in that request for comment. That was a lot easier once the request for comment was done. We removed the relationships between P21, sex or gender, and P6553, which is personal pronouns. The one from P21 over to P6553 was added back, but we removed it and explained why the change was made. So hopefully that will stick. We also removed gender-related aliases and preferred pronoun from the property label, and labels in both English and Spanish were fixed. We did that because gender and personal pronouns, while they're sometimes related and reflective of one another in someone's identity, oftentimes they are not, or the way that that shows up in people we know is variable. And so we just removed that relationship to make it clear that people shouldn't use gender or sex to imply personal pronouns or vice versa. Next slide, please. We also deprecated several heuristic values, and heuristics are used kind of as semi-references to show we use this line of reasoning to assert this data was true. We took out inferred from pronoun used because you really can't infer other things based on somebody's personal pronouns, and the sex and gender information was mostly being inferred from that. There was also inferred from person's given name, which is hugely problematic, and then inferred from given name, image, and pronoun used is obviously problematic as well. Those were mostly being used for personal pronoun and gender information. We also added we made these obsolete and added references back to the RFC. We added a mandatory citation needed constraint for personal pronouns, which wasn't there before. And we also created a new property, reason for no value, where somebody's personal pronouns might be no value because maybe they aren't using personal pronouns, or maybe they use all pronouns. So we put that in with a few values that were needed. And we've also begun implementation work on all the statements in Wikidata that use this property. There's about, I think, 7,000 statements, and we've started in the LD4 Wikidata Affinity group doing some editing sessions for that. And we'll schedule more as needed until those statements are all remediated. Next slide, please. So this is a slide with some links on how we established consensus. We started with community meetings with where we invited everybody in the Wikidata community to talk about the issue of personal pronouns data in Wikidata. And then, based a lot on Claire's research and proposals using LGBTDB and just her brilliance, we put together a request for comment with some, with the data model revisions and best practices that we wanted to do. So there's a link to that request for comment and policy. Next slide, please. And then, so we've got some information about the scope and workflow for implementation that we've been using for our wiki project. And I think I can share with you a few links so that you can see how we have decided to go about doing this. We went through and Sparkle queried Wikidata really intensely and found that we've got about 7,000 statements using about maybe 15 to 17 different languages. Primarily, those statements are in English and in, I think there's a few in German, there's a lot in Spanish. If you see that there are statements in Wiki Project personal pronouns in the implementation area that are in your language area of expertise, we could really use help in remediating statements for those languages that we don't speak. We also have this LD4 Wikidata Affinity Group project series that's ongoing. We recorded the first session, and that was our overview of the project and onboarding for new folks who wanted to get involved. And then we've got 2 more working sessions that you would be more than welcome to join on Tuesday, November 25th and Tuesday, December 9th. Next slide, please. That's all we had. Thank you all so much for your time, and we welcome your questions and discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Crystal and Claire, for your presentation. Please, if you have any question, please let us know. And just also to say here to everyone, in the coming weeks, we are going to be doing some workshop on Wikidata, and I think it's something that we encourage anyone who is interested in knowing more about Wikidata to please sign up to the workshop that we'll be running. And this is part of the Wikidata birthday celebration that is ongoing at the moment. And also another ways for us to continue to capture, to continue to query Wiki by capturing data. Any question, please? I can't see any question, and I can't see anyone in the. Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Vic.
Yeah, I have 2 of them, but that's because I love your work. So the first one is, are you doing any assessment on how this can be connected to the impact on AI? Because I know this can help maybe narrow or maybe provide better inputs about pronouns on people for AI reading our database. That's one question. And if you are planning to do any assessment on that, or you're working on anything related to that. And there is one second question about, have you had any backlash because of this work at Wikidata?
Yeah, so for AI, I think that our assessment, I don't think that we have anything planned for that, but our goals have been to prevent incorrect information from making its way into Wikidata in the first place. And so while we're remediating statements that already exist and hoping that moving forward, those can be repaired in any AI systems that use Wikidata as training, we also really wanted to be clear about what makes a good reference? It needs to be current. It needs to be self-stated. It needs to be public. We need to use the same words to describe people as they use to describe themselves. We need to uphold standards for consent and privacy. And so making that really clear has been kind of our strategy for protecting folks from the harms that can come from being misgendered or outed in the broader web in general, especially folks who are not public figures, which many people in Wikidata, because we don't have the same requirements for notability that Wikipedia has, it's very easy to get yourself into Wikidata, to find yourself described in Wikidata. And so, and then, yes, we have gotten some backlash, mostly during our request for comment. We had some people who were just really wanting to do personal attacks and who were pretty mean about that. So that wasn't very much fun, but we were glad that the community was around. Owen was really supportive during that time and sort of explained to us like, hey, this sometimes happens. This is how you can respond. Don't be too bothered. You didn't do anything wrong. So it was good to have a community there.